Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a tier list for the best premium decks. What are the best premium decks at the moment as of June 2024? This list will cover essentially everything to anticipate for BCS, and obviously with, I guess, no premium collection revealed just yet, this is pretty much kind of the landscape of what you be expecting for the next season. Let's get right into it. If you guys haven't subscribed to this channel, make sure you do click that subscribe button for all notifications on this channel. So this time, it's actually very similar to the previous list with some different alterations. We obviously got the Shiranui deck set as well as the Luard one, so that kind of shakes things up a little bit. So I'm just going to start off with, I guess, the best deck at the moment, which is Grappler. I think this deck pretty much has everything in its toolbox. Has a Null Griffin, has hand, has multi-attack, has power, has early game-ish, has pretty much everything that you want in a deck. The flexibility in the cards that you choose for this deck is really good as well. And yes, it does take a bit of a better pilot to play. So, you know, you can't just randomly just pick up this deck and expect to do well. Lots of time needs to be logged into this deck, but, you know, time and effort rewards players, and, you know, time and effort means more tops, right? So Grappler, I think one of the best, or if not the best deck in the format at the moment. Katrina as well, Neo Nectar. Katrina with all the French guys, Johan, Louis. This deck is just so stable, like very, very cookie cutter. Straightforward deck. Actually, it's probably one of the most straightforward decks to pick up in premium at the moment. So if you guys are, you know, interested, the Neo Nectar premium deck set is coming out. So that's like an easy way to get access to Katrina's, and then pretty much everything else is just like super cheap V parts, Maiden or Flower Carpet, Anelma, Stampioni. Like all of these cards are like super cheap. You don't necessarily need Inverno. Inverno is like nice to have, but pretty much you're starting Katrina, or sometimes maybe Megaloma. But yeah, that's pretty much the deck in a nutshell. Then looking at something else like Bermuda, Highlander is still a deck to consider. Obviously with the Sienna package, I think this deck has more outs now, more ways to deal with your opponent's rear guards, especially in the Grappler matchup. Bouncing like a Skull Dragon into hand is actually really detrimental because they have no way of discarding it like during the battle phase, other than, you know, obviously calling out via Greed Shade or something like that. But yeah, jeopardizing that is really strong. Being able to just nuke, like, I don't know, a big fat plant token is really good too. So yeah, Highlander is still a deck that, you know, if it high rolls and it hits the nuts, you might just randomly lose, right? Now let's talk about something like Shadow Paladin. So Shadow Paladin, there has been a few Luard Crest decks coming up, and I think the deck has potential. So if I'm putting it in B, B is like the benchmark, right? This is like the deck that I would consider for regionals, or you should consider for regionals, and you wouldn't, you know, feel too bad about playing it. Has access to essentially a G guard that perfect guards, which is really good into the DP matchup, and into anything that, you know, hits big crit, big damage. So yeah, Shadow Paladin, you know, it got an added equipment in the crest. The crest is a grade 1 also, so it fulfills ritual, and there's like a few funny builds with Luard. Raging Form is, you know, still a deck, I guess, but yeah, it's not as obviously predominant as some of the other ones in S and A. Now Tachi's for me, in a vacuum, is just okay, but you give it to someone who knows how to build it and knows how to play it, will probably exert in the deck much more than just the standard average Joe, right? You give this deck to anybody, they'll have no idea how to play it, and I think the deck itself probably needs a bit more support for it to be a regional viable deck, right? You always get, you know, someone cooking up Tachi cards, they're bringing it to regional, like, good for them, right? Like, they love their clan, and, you know, they know the ins and outs of it, and they're gonna do well, right? But I don't anticipate this deck being better than like Grappler or Bermuda, or maybe it's as good as Luard Crest, but I think I've been playing Luard Crest a little bit and it's like not too bad. But yeah, I wouldn't probably touch Tachi's. So yeah, I mean, you know, if people can prove me wrong, great. Like, I do want to see some more Tachikaze tops. That'd be pretty cool. They've been in the shadow for too long. Darker Regulars. Darker Regulars is still a good deck. With Bracing Angel Ladder actually makes this deck really strong. It's no longer susceptible to Denial Griffin plays, to screw up NLK. Sometimes if you drop a Hope on Damp, your opponent just dies. And some decks have to play super aggressive against this deck, and it has an insane G-Guard to turn off crits, which is really strong. So you're essentially guarding like 3 attacks for essentially a G-Guard, right? Because 1 G-Guard, if you have 20 soul, you just neg 1 crit for like 2 units. So you just choose the 2 rear guards and then just manually guard the Vanguard, which is really strong. I think DI, though, hasn't really moved away from what it was 2-3 years ago. So the deck is very linear. Doesn't have near as much flexibility as Highlander, but its high roll and its game plan is still the same and super strong. So it's still a deck to, you know, contend against, right? Next one is like, this is Angel Feather, right? Angel Feather is, I don't know, man. There's not much going on. Yes, there's like a few tops here and there, you know. Myanmar had one, maybe like an Angel Gize somewhere. But I think the deck is just not good enough to bring to a regional. Teams is a little bit different. And when I say regional, it's like a solo event, right? I wouldn't think to bring Angel Gize or any Angel Feather deck at the moment to a solo regional, purely because it just doesn't have the toolbox or the toolkit to be able to handle against Grand Blue, Neo Nectar, Highlander, DI. It just doesn't have that. It needs a lot more support, and I think, you know, if I am very blunt about it, I think it's a very weak deck at the moment. And yes, it'll probably be really good in some matchups, but some matchups is not majority of matchups, and that is a really big outlier for this particular clan. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to leave Angel Feather there, but it's not abysmal, right? It's not like unplayable. I think if you build the deck in a way, you know, if you're an Angel Feather enthusiast, then you might be able to cook something up. But yeah, you know, to the average player like me, Angel Feather just kind of goes there, right? Spike Brothers, I think, is really good. But I guess if you like high roll with Spike Brothers, you just win. At least that's what I found last BCS. Like, Spike Brothers can sometimes just randomly destroy you, and that's that. So yeah, I think Spike Brothers kind of goes there. It still has the same package in Rising Greed on. Still has Galley. Galley's a really strong stride. Has Bracing Angel Ladder now. So I think, you know, protection to rearguard is really strong as well. Then next, this is DP. DP, still a good deck, but I think it's not A tier, right? You bring DP, you sometimes one-shot people, you will get a top. Most decks just can't deal with it. Decks in the top end will be able to farm out the Elementaria Sanctitude. So, you know, Grand Blue could probably do it if it draws enough. Or I don't think you can pick it up with Greed Shade, I don't think. Neo Nectar can find it off Lattice Lava. Just different ways to be able to find Sanctitude. And Sanctitude just drops its deck, right? Also, Grand Blue has a neg crit G-Guard, which stops DP as well. So that's that as well. Same with Darker Regulars, also has a neg G-Guard, and it's just really abysmal, right? So yeah, I think DP is really strong in most circumstances. It's probably really good into a lot of the top end decks' bad matchups. But yeah, it just gets annihilated by a lot of these other more flexible decks, right? Sometimes you can win though, so I'm not saying it's too bad. Tharvas. I think Tharvas is okay. I mean, the deck hasn't really changed. It needs a finisher, I think. Relying on Balan Arena or Megiddo to win your games, or even the, whatever it's called, the Valios. Like, I don't think it's good enough in this environment, right? A lot of these decks have like really good finisher strides. Katrina, for example, Bartolomeo, Heltrada, NLK into Barrow Magnus into Forfax. Like, these decks have like insane finishes, right? and Aquaforce just doesn't have that. Sure, you can lock power or whatever, stop OTs, but yeah, there's only so many attacks that you deal with, and it's measly smallish numbers anyways. So yeah, Aquaforce goes there, but I think, you know, you put it in a really good person's hands, that's going to skyrocket to like A, and, you know, the deck will be really good. Then looking at Gears, I think Gears is strong. We saw Dave Vex's World Invitational deck. I think it's a really good framework. Being able to just ride down after Time Reaper and then go into a Steam Maiden Schlishma, and then multi-attacking from that, I think it's really strong. There's obviously, you know, different variants like Crestjet as well, but I think, you know, Dave Vex's deck is like really standardized and in a way that makes this deck really strong. So, you know, again, put it into a good pilot's hand is good, but I think, you know, it's definitely better than, you know, DP, right? Also has a PGG guard, which also is really good against DP, so that's that. Then this is Mega Colony, right? Or is this Mega Colony? This is Mega Colony. This has like the horns and stuff, right? So Mega Colony, I actually think is in B tier, right? And my take is that Mega Colony is good if you put it against matchup. It's good against, right? But if you put it against matchups it's not good against, Nova Grappler, Highlander, anything that calls from hand, it gets absolutely destroyed, right? So I think people overestimate this deck too much, and I think in the previous seasons I've also mentioned that this is like a anti-meta pick, right? You kind of have to gauge when people are using like hand-oriented decks or super, you know, superior calling decks, then you can kind of adjust Ghidorah to play into those environments, right? But to be honest, if you are playing the first BCS of this next season, I 100% highly recommend you guys just play a deck that deals with Ghidorah, and you literally will probably win the regional, right? Pro tip, there you go. So I think Ghidorah is just there. It gets destroyed by non-superior calling decks, and it literally can't do anything about it, and it loses to DP real hard. So I don't actually know, like, should that go here maybe? Like, I think it's a good deck. You'll bring it to regional, you'll get, you know, pretty solid wins, but I would never look at Ghidorah as a deck that wins a regional, right? And I think, you know, bad matchups for Ghidorah, it's like very minimal at the moment, but once, you know, things really get into gear and people know to beat Ghidorah, like, it's inevitable. Like, this deck just cannot win or cannot top a regional, right? So what's this one? Genesis? Genesis, I think, is still solid. I think, you know, Regalia is still a deck to care about. The deck hasn't really changed, but it got like slight little upgrades, you know, like draw crits, for example. I think Minerva's still strong. People just have to deal with it, and sometimes decks can't farm, you know, 3 PGs to get rid of stuff on the board and can't deal with like a restanding Yggdrasil. Yeah, that's just how it is, right? Regalia, still strong, still, you know, a restanding deck, and restanding decks are good, right? What's this one? Golds? Golds? I think it's unexplored, right? I think Golds hasn't really seen the spotlight since probably like 2019. It's seen more in V, but very rarely in Premium. So I think Golds can just be at the top of C, on the brink of B, I think. It has the same, I guess, criteria as Tachikaze. So if you give it to someone who knows what they're doing, then they'll probably cook this up and absolutely destroy a regional. But yeah, I think it's an unexplored deck, and we haven't seen enough to be able to gauge that any higher than C, I think. This is Great Nature. Great Nature, I think Great Nature is the same, right? We've seen some people cooking here and there. You know, you give this to someone who knows how to play Great Nature and, you know, can bring it to a regional really well. I think Great Nature is in a place where it's kind of sitting there, right? This is Nuba. Nuba is one of the best decks at the moment. Crest Shunui, the power in that deck is really strong. Has Drag Vader OT, you know, Drag Vader is ridiculous. Has an on stride that essentially creates you 2 protect markers and discards one of your opponent's hand. Has Sukumura Khan to essentially go back down to 4 cards, and then multi-attack, which is ridiculously strong. The Crest allows you to play Rene without any compromises, so units that your opponent calls from their hand essentially lose continuous and auto abilities. So I think this deck is very strong. It's probably one of the biggest contenders at the moment. It can definitely beat, you know, Neonectar if the Neonectar player doesn't know what they're doing. Lyric can take out any of these other decks if they don't know what they're doing, right? So I think Crest Shunui, one of the best decks in the format, and you know, it's pretty accessible. You just ask 3 of your standard friends, hey, do you have a Shunui grade 1? You borrow it for a regional and you top, right? That's just how it is. Really easy, yeah? So that's Crest Shunui. This is Yasue, right? I think Yasue is pretty good. I think you ride up Yasue, you go into the train, copy the grade 2 that draws, and then end it with Shiryuki. I think a pretty straightforward game plan. Dies to Honoli, so I think putting it in B is nice because all of these other decks have ways to tutor or just out aggroes you, right? Yasue is a piece reliant deck, so I think you verse like a control deck like Ghidorah, you just lose, right? You have no ways to like superior call, and Ghidorah, like Dark Fates itself can just like rest stuff, right? Rewriting into grade 3 is really annoying as well. You just have no way to extend against Ghidorah. And then like a lot of these other decks play Honoli, and Honoli just absolutely claps your cheeks, right? Unfortunately, that's just how it is. Link Joker. So I think it's fair to put Link Joker into the same tier as Ghidorah, right? Purely because the outcome of CBD is the exact same as Ghidorah, right? You put it into an environment where CBD is good, like, you know, Grand Blue flooded meta, or, you know, if you put it against Katrina, you're going to have a really hard time. You put it against like Crest Shunui, you might actually have a really good time. You just lock their front row. But Crest Shunui just plays with your rear guards, and then they just attack with your rear guards instead. Really bad matchup into Bermuda, but really good into like DI, Spike Brothers, Gear Chronicle, maybe Regalia. So I think like you put it into a really good environment, and I think this deck will shine. Similar to Ghidorah, so you know, if you catch like the environment like countering you, then you're gonna have a really rough time at regionals, right? This is Kagero, and Kagero is just not it. There's nothing there. It's been down for so long, hasn't gotten really good premium support, got like some few random strides. Like Kagero has been just always this deck that is revolved around restanding Vanguards, and it doesn't really get any supporting units for it. And I think, yeah, it's just really tough for Kagero, and it needs something more than just Denial Griffin and restanding strides. Like that's just how it is, right? Narukami, I think Narukami is still good. The deck hasn't changed. Vanquishing to Sweep Command into multi-attacks is just really strong. I think all S tier decks, maybe other than Shunui, but Shunui will just clap you because of the power ceiling. Most of these other decks have ways to counter yours. So I think if you're an Eradicator, I think you're pretty good sitting at like A tier, because it's pretty formidable into most of these decks anyways, right? Novas. So it's a hot topic at the moment, and I think Nova actually doesn't go in A. I think Nova goes in B, purely because Steven has played this for Worlds, and it's open now. The deck is pretty much shown to the world, and people know how to counter it. You drop multiple Honolis, and this deck just dies, right? Unfortunately, it's just how it is. Honoli just seems to be like this thing that really claps B tier decks. And you know, Neonectar can fish it efficiently, Grand Blue as well. A lot of these decks can. Crest Shunui just rips your hand apart, and you just can't do anything because you don't have the pieces to set up your board. But I guess like Victor goes into these decks kind of okay. But yeah, I think I wouldn't be comfortable bringing Victor and winning a whole regional like Steven can. I think this was a really big surprise factor in the previous season, which translated well into the environment he played in, right? So yeah, that's that. OTT, I think OTT is pretty solid. Solid game plan, just does what it does. Sometimes beats all these other decks, just draws a bunch, has guard restrict, has Popo for essentially unguardable. So yeah, sometimes you just play super aggro, go into Popo and just win, right? That's essentially what happened to me last BCS, so that's pretty cool. This is Royals. Royals is what? Jewel Knights? I think Royals... Jewel Knights Crystal Luster doesn't really do much. I think it goes here with Angel Feather. There's only really one predominant deck. Everything else is kind of average. And I think, yeah, it needs a specialist to whip it up. That's essentially it, right? Probably needs some more support. It might see more play once the premium deck set comes out for Salome. But yeah, it's just really hard to be able to gauge where this is. Maybe it has an established deck already, so maybe it goes in C. But yeah, I think it goes there. So Pale Moon, this is like tough, I think. I think the deck that I brought for Worlds going 1-5 was absolutely garbage. And I think it goes in C, right? None of these decks, like, sure, it could probably beat, like, I don't know, Link Joker. Doesn't beat Nova Grappler unless you drop a Honolly, right? Probably beats Aqua Force, but a lot of these decks it just doesn't beat, right? Actually, it beats Narakami, right? Narakami was flooded at Manila, and that's pretty much why I brought Harry, right? Harry beats Narakami, but has a really hard time into everything else, right? So, as much as I want to put it in a tier higher than C, I think it's rightfully in C. Sure, we will get the Harry deck set, and this will probably change. Either higher or it either stays in the same place. Probably high by a tier. Pale Moon actually has a lot of moving pieces, and yeah, if you don't build your deck correctly or if you don't know how to play the deck correctly, like, you might as well put it in F, right? The deck is just really fragile in different ways. It needs setup, and it's asking a lot for something that another deck can do really simply, right? For example, Grand Blue wants a setup, right? You just Stride Obadiah, you ditch 5 cards, and that's your setup, right? That's just how it is, right? Neo Nectar needs setup, sure, I'll strike Katrina, I'll call 5 cards, and that's my setup, right? Crest Shunui doesn't actually need setup, it just needs to draw the Crest Grade 1, and that's a day, right? Bermuda doesn't even need setup because it uses whatever cards the deck gives it, right? Sure, maybe Dark Irregulars, but Dark Irregulars just soul charges like 15 billion cards, and that's it, right? So I think a lot of these decks do not need setup to get their game plan working, whereas Pale Moon does. And I think you give any of these decks like even just an ounce of time, it'll probably destroy Pale Moon. And unfortunately, that's just how it is, right? And I'm being very straightforward because I know what Pale Moon is like. I play the deck pretty much religiously. I think this deck is no more higher than C at the moment. May change when the Stride deck set comes out. So yeah, this is pretty much the tier list for premium. Pretty accurate, so to say. If you guys look at just the results on Fuzzy's website, VG Paradox, you'll know what to kind of expect. And this is probably the landscape going into BCS until something changes, until maybe they release like a premium collection. That'd be absolute insanity if they do. But yeah, we obviously have Nutrose deck set, Harry deck set, which might change the landscape of it. We do have the 3 new deck sets coming out as well. So yeah, lots to kind of discover. And people might just cook up something and whip out pretty much everything that I've said in this video, right? If you guys like this video, pop a like, comment down below what you guys think of the premium landscape at the moment. If you guys haven't already, click that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.